really appreciate this opportunity to come forward and talk to you all about what is by far the number one issue facing us as a city, and that, of course, is public safety. And I really appreciate the broad interest in the community on that. And naturally, you guys are right in the middle of it as well. So I'm going to start by just running through what we have been doing. You all are well aware of that, but just to kind of set the table for what's going on so that we can have our conversation accordingly. Okay. So again, we all know public safety is our number one job, our number one priority. We also know that the level of violence, gun violence in particular in our city, is not acceptable. We've seen a real spike that started in July of 21 last year, and the last couple of months have been better year over year, but they're still not acceptable in terms of where they're at. I want to kind of set our challenges in terms of what national challenges are. And I know some of y'all don't like to hear about this as a national problem, but the reason why this is important is whenever you're trying to solve a problem, you've got to understand, is it just a problem here in Louisville? If it was a problem just here in our city, then it would be easy for us to solve. If it's a problem with the broader context, then we've got to understand what that context is as well, so we go about facing and solving our own problems here. So there's a couple of mega trends that are facing the entire country right now. One is staffing shortages at our public safety agencies. We know what they are here in Louisville, and I'll get into each one of these in more detail here in a second. But they're facing the entire country. The private sector is having problems hiring people. That's impacting our ability to hire people and what we need to pay as we see that we are not competitive in some of our positions. So then that leads to budget questions and how we're going to find the budget answers around those. The proliferation of weapons on our streets is worse than it ever has been, particularly illegal weapons. So that is a major contributor to violent activity, along with the proliferation of gang activity that we've got going on in our city, in particular beefs between separate gangs and younger people getting involved in gang activity, including more and more young girls involved in gang activity as well. COVID-19 was a factor in terms of separating our young citizens from adult role models in the community. In terms of that type of influence, that was greatly hurt with the closure of JCPS and community centers, et cetera. And then there are low levels of trust between some parts of our community and some parts of the police department. And that impacts our ability to get information from our community to help us solve some of the violent crime problems. So those issues are impacting us, and they're impacting cities around the country as well. So when we get into some more of the details around this, we can see that the staffing shortage, and this is just some examples of what I think everybody knows are national issues. It's not an excuse. These are our problems here. But again, we need to understand there's a bigger context to solving the problems. In terms of staffing shortages, LMPD obviously is short about 300 sworn and 80 civilians. If we're fully budgeted, we'd be about 1,300 sworn and 400 civilians. Our recruit classes, the most recent one was 15, which is much smaller than what we would like. We've got two classes we've got one class right now of recruits of 14 and another one of 28, MAC 50, which will start November the 1st. So we're expanding our efforts in recruiting of new police officers. We're hoping that the lieutenant's contract will pass you all's vote here pretty soon. That needs to take place before we start talking about the officers and sergeants contracts, because we want to understand where we're at on the issues directed at reform with the police in the community to build trust in there. Hopefully that's approved, so then that becomes part of the officers and sergeants contract, so then we can work out the rest of that contract. So that's what's going on with LMPD. With our corrections, you guys have dove into corrections quite a bit. You understand we're about 20% short on our staff in corrections. Just as a comparison, state corrections is 50% short on corrections. So it's not something per se with Louisville Metro Corrections. This is, again, a state problem, a national problem, but we're not competitively paying people in corrections. We got a contract that's in place. The challenge we're going to have, and you all are going to be a big part of solving this challenge, is that this compensation problem is not just a corrections problem. So what we see all over the country, as we know right now, is kind of a redefinition of what wages are required for people to work, with record numbers of people leaving the workplace. So we have issues in corrections. We've got them with EMA. We've got them with solid waste. It goes on and on. So if we just said, let's just increase the wages $5, we can't, in my mind, it's not going to stop just at corrections. So if we did that in all of our impacted departments right now, it would be a problem of about $45 million or so, at least $45 million. So the question then comes up to us is, where's the $45 million going to come from? And so we either need to cut services in places or find some other way for these funds to come up with, and prioritize, obviously, the various departments that we're looking at in terms of whatever the increase might be. So that would make me happy to pay everybody more money. But the question for us is we have to balance our budget, as we know, is where do the funds come from? So we got two pretty dynamic forces going at each other. The reality of what's happening in the marketplace in terms of wages versus the necessity to balance our budget. Corrections also has a couple of incentives in place. You all are aware of those. We'd like to give those a little bit of time to see how they could work out, but we know this is a significant problem. Proliferation of weapons and murders spiking in cities across the United States is certainly a reality that we're all very familiar with. On the weapons side, like your all's help to help us work with the state legislature on some common sense gun reform, gun safety reform. One of the things that's exasperating is that police, when they confiscate weapons, cannot destroy those weapons that are used in criminal acts. They just end up back on the streets. So I would hope that you all could help us go to work with Frankfort to see if we could help that. And then just also responsible firearm ownership. The amount of guns that are stolen out of people's vehicles and back up on the street are a serious problem. And people need to be responsible if they're gun owners and be responsible for their guns. And we could use some help in terms of statutory provisions with that as well. The gang activity that's going on in our city is most likely an all-time high. And so that results in disputes over drugs, over money, over social media activity that spills into the streets. And instead of back in our day where it would have been solved with a fist fight due to the proliferation of weapons, people start shooting each other. So this is a significant problem. LMPD, as I believe you all know, has reorganized in a couple of different ways, and Chief Shields can talk more about that if you like here today. But the Criminal Interdiction Division is primarily focused on individuals who are funding criminal gangs, and also our focus on getting guns off of the street is what is driving their activity first and foremost. And then the major crimes unit with Chief has been underway in the 2nd and 4th divisions for some proactive activity relative to disrupting gang activity. And then obviously GVI, or Group Violence Intervention, is focused on gang activity as well. I spoke about COVID-19, and COVID-19 disrupted some of those relationships we have between youth and adults, and that is bad when that is disrupted and youth start taking their cues from social media as opposed to some of the responsible adults that they have in their life. And then last, I spoke about lack of trust. This is something we wish was not in our community, but it's a fact both here. Policing is at an inflection and a crossroads in America, and Louisville is no exception. So we have to work on building trust between police and our community. The police contracts are designed to hopefully begin some of that repair. And this is not a citywide issue. There's some parts of the city that have high trust in the police, and there's other parts that have low trust. We need that trust so that we can get information from our citizens to take our most violent citizens off the streets. We want to first and foremost help people not be violent, but for those that choose to have a life of violence and guns, they need to be held accountable, and everybody deserves to be able to sit on their front porch and be safe. Relative to the plan, you all are familiar with this plan. We debated it, you all approved it, and you all have funded it. So it's a 6-series plan made up of these pillars that I'll go into, and that you all funded, which I'm very grateful for here with July 1st. So we've got a good, robust plan that's in the process of going in place. So it starts with community mobilization. So that's getting the entire community behind what's going on. And there's a variety of approaches within community mobilization, from the ambassador program, which is getting people more aware of all the challenges in public safety, to the reconciliation program to bring around the cultural aspects of people understanding the gulf between police and citizens and how to bridge what that gulf is. Our youth implementation team is part of this as well. They're a team that advises me from the voices of the youth about what's taking place in our city. And then other related initiatives around this are Lean Into Louisville, our One Love campaign, the Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods Advisory Council, and then our external partners as well. So these folks are all part of helping the community understand what our approach is to reducing violence in our city. We then go into the next approach, which is prevention. Okay, so how can we stop people from going down a life of crime to begin with? This is proactive money, which it's much better to spend money here. Most people, when they think about public safety, they immediately want to start talking about the police. As you all know, police are just the law enforcement side of this. So our prevention program is quite robust. It includes our Office of Youth Development, our Pivot to Peace expansion, Summer Works program, emergency assistance funding, our youth chats, our Clean Collaborative, and then young opportunity or young adult youth opportunity campuses as well. So we're focused here again on stopping kids from going down crime. And as a lot of y'all know, this is the first year where we're starting to fund some of these initiatives. On the intervention side, so this is when crime has taken place, and now we're trying to stop more crime from taking place. So part of this is to make sure that we have the proper level of trauma-informed care in our community. If you've been involved with this or know of others, it's extraordinarily traumatic when you're in and around gun violence. So making sure that we're giving the proper mental health assistance during these times of need is really important. A hospital-based program is when we go into our hospitals after gun violence or knife violence has occurred and talked with the people that are victims and talk to them about the odds of them being victims again if their conduct does not behave, and do they want to off-ramp out of this life, or if they're a victim, what are their concerns and how that we can help them. It's a very effective program. Clergy response team is another one of our elements where the clergy is involved in talking to the community and community members on how we can stop retaliation from taking place. This is our biggest concern in intervention, is to stop the retribution and the retaliation. The deflection model, you all have been big champions of that. There's $5 million in the budget dedicated to that. So yesterday, we were pleased to announce the launching of that after U of L and Spalding and others completed their analysis and study, and we'll be starting our pilot in the 4th Division, and we hope to be up by December 1st. So of course, that program is all about sending the right first responder to the right location at the right time when a police response is not necessary. The 9/11 nurse triage is again about redirecting calls from police response. So part of the addressing our police shortage, where hope is going to be helped in some regard through the deflection model and the 911 nurse triage model. In other cities, you've got 4 or 5% of calls that are redirected and that do not require a police response. So we're hoping to see that type of relief for our police department as well. And then the community outreach teams, I think you all have seen them out and about, are just day-to-day case management and working with people that are at risk of being involved in further violence and making sure that they're getting the type of assistance that they need. GVI is a big part of this. So group violence intervention, we use the word groups and gangs interchangeably. The FY22 budget has $500,000 for the GVI initiative. We've started this program. It's really robust and it's underway, and in many ways, primarily as it relates to house calls. Our partners, our mentors, our coaches on this from John Jay are very pleased with the progress that we're making. We have yet to do any big call-ins, primarily because of the COVID restrictions. We hope to maybe have one before the year's over, but John Jay, I believe, has provided you all with their kind of view of where we're at, and I feel like we're making good progress, and we hope to have someone from John Jay here in the next month or two so they can give you a further update on where we're at relative to where they feel like we should be. Okay. And then enforcement. So this is the police area where people think about what's going on with law enforcement response. As I mentioned, we've redirected the focus of the criminal interdiction division from narcotics to using intelligence to target specific individuals that are known to be involved with violent crime. Louisville is not unlike the rest of the country in that there's a small percentage of people that perpetrate most of the violent crime. So the key is identifying who they are, letting them know that we know who they are, and the accountability steps if they have taken an action against the law or if they intend to, and what will happen to them as a result of that. Through September 1st, CID's made 78 arrests, of which 45 are identifiable gang members, and they've all been charged with multiple offenses. We work with our federal partners that are embedded with us or us with them on these initiatives as well. If we can bring federal charges against these folks, our most violent folks, we want to do that because obviously the federal charges have a bigger stick than the state charges that we have. In particular, this one CID case has resulted in the federal indictment of 14 known violent offenders with ties to gang activity in the Victory Park and Market Street area. This focus has also resulted in the recovery of a number of guns that we suspect have been used in other criminal activity as well. And from March through September, CID has recovered 74 firearms, including a single investigation that resulted in the recovery of 20 firearms and multiple federal indictments. So firearms seizures are up about 17% compared to last year, and we're on track to have about 300 plus guns reported stolen from cars this year compared to last year. So this continues to be a problem. So when we talk about then, okay, how do we change organizations so that we're more effective in our response? A couple different efforts, the Hillard Heights reforms. We started that before anybody, came down on us. This was after the summer of last year of racial protest, to say, look, we need to get a top to bottom review of our police department to understand where our gaps are. So we've completed that. And as you all know, we have quarterly reports on what those gaps are. So that's one of the guides we use to improve our police department. The other area is the Department of Justice investigation. So we haven't talked a lot about that with the council. So over the next couple of weeks or so, we're going to be sharing more information with you all about the DOJ investigation, because it's going to result in some financial suggestions that we'll be making to the council. So as you all know, the DOJ launched a pattern and practice investigation to determine whether or not there's a pattern or practice of unconstitutional policing in the LMPD. And they're focused on 4 areas. One is, does LMPD engage in discriminatory policing? Do we conduct unreasonable searches, seizures, and arrests in our stops? Do we conduct unreasonable searches and seizures and arrests in our homes as well? And then whether we operate to discriminate against people with disabilities. So those are the major area of focus. And with the people with disabilities, a lot of that was tied into homeless folks in our community and how LMPD investigates with them. So they're hard at work right now investigating all that. Cities take 2 different approaches to DOJ investigations. One is to kind of obstruct and delay and complain. We chose to take a very different approach, and that is to work collaboratively with DOJ. Felt like that was, I look at the DOJ investigation as kind of the ultimate high-level audit of the police department. Audits are good things. They uncover gaps in performance areas and help you improve. So that's how we see our work with the DOJ. So what we're doing with them is we're sharing all of our data systems, our facilities and personnel for anything that they need. We set up a team of folks to correspond with the DOJ and hired one of the nation's foremost reform experts to consult. This individual's been involved in many DOJ efforts, most notably in New Orleans and Baltimore. And then we've also set up peer networks with other cities that have gone through or are going through the process of a DOJ investigation so we can learn from each other. And so we're mapping out also then what we think a gold standard community-oriented policing looks like when we're at the end of this. So I think it'll make us be a stronger city and a stronger LMPD, and certainly that's what people deserve. As it relates to other organizational changes and developments, you all know that Civilian Review Board legislation was passed. We're in the very final stages of selecting the Inspector General. We hope to have an announcement on that in the next week or two. The Civilian Citation Initiative, the One Love Louisville campaign, Restorative Justice, and the Youth Implementation Team are all under the organizational change pillar as well. And the last pillar is the reentry pillar. So this is to help folks that come back into our society to make sure that their odds for recidivism decrease significantly. So in this year's budget, you all approved $500,000 for Reimage. You're familiar with its success before. We're at about a 70% success rate in terms of providing someone with a mentor, making sure they have a GED, a job, et cetera. That's much higher than the national average. And then other related programs out of that are the Second Chance employment initiatives, and then corrections FACT programs, so we can have a warm handoff back into the community. All right, so just think about, when we think about what is the plan, just if I would encourage you, just go back to the 6 pillars, look at the programs, look how they've been funded, and say, how can we focus our efforts within those 6 pillars? Let's talk about a couple of the kind of more prominent issues that we're struggling with. One is juvenile justice issues. As you all know, a couple budgets ago, Youth Detention Center was taken out of the budget. That is a state responsibility that the city was funding an additional, I think it was $8 to $9 million for. We had budgets with the increase in pension responsibility, so the discontinuation of the YDS facility was one of the casualties of that budget. None of us believe that incarcerating young people is the way out of this. There are some young people that are very violent, and we've seen that age getting younger and younger in our community. So we're in contact with the juvenile justice on some of these issues in terms of photo arrays. That's come up as an issue with you all. We're following state law in that particular area. A court designated worker, we're waiting on the state with some CDW release so we can get into that in a more effective manner. And then of course, YDS used to be 2 blocks from here. And right now it's out in the eastern part of the county. So the time it takes to go out there, the time it takes for a police officer to be with a juvenile while there's transition taking place is too long. So Deputy Mayor Hessen has been working with DJJ in Frankfurt with a couple different remedies around that particular challenge. Okay. And then people ask, how can I help? So this is a whole of city approach. These are the different ways that the public can help with the Ambassador Institute, the Youth Implementation Team, being part of our trauma-informed network, Ocean's outreach team, and then of course businesses can help by hiring somebody for our Summer Works program. How the council can help, just if you would communicate broadly in your newsletters to your constituents about the opportunities that we have, put the 6-pillar network in there so people understand we do have a plan. We're working a plan against a very difficult challenge. And then continue to work with us to identify our opportunities with the ARP funding. As you all know, at the end of this month, we're going to be putting forth some suggested spending on homelessness and affordable housing, premium pay, and then possibly public safety if we're ready to do all that. So there's going to be more opportunities in that to expand some of the programs that we've got working in this area of public safety. And so we've got 11 council members right now on our 4 ARP working teams, weighing in on the plans and tasked with informing the balance of the council. And then just other areas where y'all could help is help us when we go to Frankfurt in January. I know we asked you, I think it was this last week, for your all's feedback on what you thought state legislative priorities should be. So if you could help us with some common sense gun law reform, that would be good, including allowing police to confiscate and destroy weapons that are used in criminal activities, and then holding firearm owners more responsible for being in charge of their weapons so that they do not fall into the hands of the wrong people. And then how we communicate. This is an area I know we responded to a letter from 3 of you all on Friday, and we put in there an example of what a month's worth of communication looks like, both through press conferences, through press releases, through social media, through personal appearances as well. So there's a lot of ways that we communicate all of those. LMPD has started a weekly newsletter about a month ago as well. We're in regular contact with our state leaders on our state legislative agenda, in the juvenile justice cabinet on the issues that I just spoke about as well. Dr. Polio and myself and his team and my team are in regular communication with each other on the challenges that face our students moving in and out of the schools. And then, of course, we have regular meetings with the council leadership as well. Okay, so I just wanted to start off with kind of framing and reminding everybody what the plan is. And we've got folks here on my team that can dive into each one of the details of these if I don't have the answers. And with that, we're happy to take any questions.